live and online. It's Sleepless with Steve and the Movie Book Club with your host, Steve Pulaski.
Back and better than ever. Second week in a row with a gruesome twosome. It is Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. We come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening, even on a weird Wednesday like this. One of the sportscasters I watched today brought up an interesting point, and I wish by the time he was on, my show was already over. My morning radio show was done, but he said something that I totally felt, because now being in radio, this is the second technically is the second time I've been live doing a show after an election.
Yeah.
And he said, and he even said, he's like, I'm in a studio with 4 producers and my co-host. And he's like, these are always weird shows to do, because I know that he's like, you're not in the room with me, obviously, but he's like, I know half of my audience is elated and half of my audience is devastated. And he said, and he's like, it's such a weird thing. He's like, it just feels different. And then he's like, we got Tom Brady on the show at noon. But he's like, that'll bring us together. But I felt the same way.
It's Tom Brady.
I felt the same way this morning, though. And I did in 2020, I remember, too. In 2020, it was like, election week, I remember, too. And it was COVID on top of that, too. So it was even weird. It was just such like a surrealist dystopian time. But you can go to a lot of different sources to get a commentary on the election and things like that. I'd rather provide a release. I think you, Dom, who is way more politically active than myself, I think you would like an opportunity for an hour to speak about movies and pop culture and things like that. So I hope that's what we can be for whoever you may be, however you may be watching us tonight. I hope that's what we can be for you, because it's so easy, I think, to go down like a doom scrolling however you feel, whether you feel happy, whether you feel sad, whether you feel indifferent. I think there's few people who feel indifferent, but however you feel, I think it's easy to kind of get sucked into the social media chamber of like just nihilism and everything like that, or just like mean-spirited bragging, whatever it is. So I hope that we can provide a little bit of an outlet on a weird day like today, because we are talking about a very interesting movie, one that isn't entirely divorced from the election concept, but is something so also different in its own right, that we don't get many movies like this, especially in the theater. So I'm excited to talk about Conclave, the brand new sort of, I guess, talky Catholic Church thriller mystery movie. That's what we're talking
drama.
about.
People have asked me, like, well, how would you describe this? Right? I say political drama.
I would go. I wouldn't dispute that. I would argue, though. I would argue there's really an aura of mystery in this, though, too.
True.
There's a strong political mystery drama. I think it's got a thriller element to it. What does Wikipedia say?
It says mystery thriller.
I'd have drama in there. I'd have drama in there before that. I always, whenever I have like Wikipedia always seems to pithily summarize it. I knew I was in for a good time when I looked up Parasite for the very first time, and they called it a tragicomedy. And I knew it, and I'm like, that's not one you see. That's not a genre you see very often. Mm-hmm. Name drop. So I'm happy to say that. But we will talk Conclave today. That is our movie. Woke up this morning, thought we were going to talk about Here, and I helped curate the damn schedule. And next week, Dom and Joe will be talking about Here. I will be absent next week, but they will be here talking about Here next week. At any rate, Dom, how are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm doing all right. It was got to see some friends yesterday, and we had gyro and burger. And we watched some election things. And the thing about doom scrolling is I brought my laptop, and I Steve, the first time that you were doing some kind of show during an election, it was technically with me, or at least I was there.
Yeah, you were.
The 2016 election, and that was at good old WONC in Naperville University, perhaps more known as North Central College in Naperville. But yeah, that was a heck of a night. You had a lovely newsroom with it was essentially just the classroom with everyone with their own laptops, just feeding me results while I tried to parse through that information live on the air. I'm very glad. I kind of wish I had recorded it, but frankly, I kind of glad I wasn't because I don't think it was very good. But it was an experience, and it was a unique way to experience that moment in time. And yeah, it was. I think. Yeah, I think I got. I think I went to bed at like 3 a.m, which, to be fair, was par for the course during that period of my life, our lives, when we had night owls and late night Sleepless with Steve. So, yeah, a different time, and yet not too much.
I think every presidential election hereafter, I'll think about that. I
Mm-hmm.
thought about it yesterday too. Like, because I think, it was a lot of things. I mean, me personally, it was the first election I could vote in. It was the first election that I remember experiencing with others
Mm.
and like having a kind of an age, like, an involvement because I
Yeah,
voted. You know what I mean? And experiencing with other people that like weren't my parents. Because I'm trying to remember. I don't remember. I remember watching the coverage for Romney Obama. I remember
sure.
watching it, but I don't vividly like. I couldn't tell you which TV I watched it on in my house. I really couldn't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I remember it. I obviously remember it happening and the build up to it, and but I don't remember a whole lot about it. And then it was that moment and stuff. And I remember I stood outside Studio A's door while you gave the address at like 2:30 in the morning. Because then my shift, Sleepless with Steve shift at the time, which got preempted for election coverage. I learned that day there are things more important than movies. 12 to 3 a.m. My shift was almost over. So when the mic went off, I went in and you said like you got like one more break before 3 o'clock, and
Mm-hmm.
then it's the next person's shift. And I remember I have it. I still have it saved. I have not listened to it since I gave it, but I kind of gave like a 2 minute monologue about like how I usually do Sleepless with Steve. We have an election going on, and then talking about like if I remember correctly, I think I said something to the tune of I plan on doing tomorrow, technically today, what I hope everybody else does, which is get up, go to work, go to school, treat other people with kindness, go about your day, and keep your friends and family close and hope for the best going forward for the sake of America. I think I said something to that
Mm-hmm.
tune, and I still kind of feel
You
that
did
way
it
the
for your
same,
country, Steve.
because it's like, I mean, it was kind of like one of those things, like, and I know it's like almost 3 in the morning on like a college station, but it's one of
Mm-hmm.
those things like I remember getting in that chair and I'm like, this is weird. I have one break. It's so late. This just happened. One of the biggest election upset of my life happened. And like there's so many emotions with so many people that were still at the station. There were so many different visceral reactions and everything. And it was like, how the hell do I do this? How the hell do I address these 6 people listening? It might as well have been the goddamn world for as far as
Mm-hmm.
I'm concerned. I'd never done anything like that, and I still never did anything like that. Um, but I remember that. I think I will always remember that every passing election now going forward, that will always be one of my most, stalwart memories of it all.
Yeah.
You know, we shall move forward, though. You are actually going to start the show technically too, because honestly, it was like you and Catherine who broke this news to me. Catherine first, and then I saw your message about Quincy Jones passing away just a couple of days ago. November 3rd was the date, age 91. I think news broke on Monday that he passed away. You are the resident jazz expert over here, and I know that Quincy Jones, on top of being a jazz musician, was also a huge record producer responsible for so many different careers. His impact on music, I think, is fair to call broad reaching. I want to give it to you, though, to talk about the late, great Quincy Jones.
Thank you. Yeah. So Quincy Jones is most likely going to be known, at least on the surface level, immediately as the producer that made Michael Jackson. And that makes perfect sense because he did freaking Thriller. So, which is effectively an album full of number ones and just a gargantuan cultural impact. I mean, I don't even need to say anything. It speaks for itself. It's freaking Michael Jackson. It's Thriller, right? But and millions of people are going to go into that. But in terms of how he got there, right? Yeah, he's an accomplished jazz musician and a big band leader. One of the good ones. Worked with Count Basie, if that name may ring any kind of bells with you, or probably Frank Sinatra. That guy. I don't know if maybe you heard of him before, but in terms of his accomplishments as a musician, it really does speak for itself. He's been in the game since like the 50s. So really by the time it hits the 80s, he's already like a grizzled veteran in the music world, but his work beyond jazz and crossing over into the mainstream and helping numerous artists, not just Michael Jackson, but numerous artists with their various tracks. It was a privilege to work with Quincy Jones, right? So before Timbaland, it was Quincy Jones. That was the name that you wanted attached to your single, to your hot track. And what finer example, what better example of success than with, of course, Michael Jackson himself. I will say this, though. I think in terms of how it pertains to film, he has also done a number of movie scores. I'm just naming them off of Wikipedia right here. But the original Italian Job, the original Color Purple film, In the Heat of the Night, starring Mr. Tibbs himself, right? Just all these iconic movies from the mid 20th century. And there's one song in particular. I don't have it lined up. There's no way for me to play it both on stream and for you, Steve. But there is a song called Big Band Bossa Nova. Have you heard of this tune, Steve?
Don't believe I have, no.
You have not?
Don't believe so.
Steve, so no one's going to hear this, but Steve, can you look up Big Band Bossa Nova on your personal YouTube and just listen to the first 10 seconds while I continue to rattle off various films that he has composed for? And that includes 1972's The Getaway, 1968's Jigsaw. So no, I'm kidding. I was gonna make a Saw reference, but no, not that one. No, but in terms of his filmography, he's actually been super, super accomplished. He did Roots, right? Or at least I don't know how much of Roots he did, but he was a part of Roots as well. Okay, Steve, have you listened to it?
I listened to the first 25 seconds, and I've heard that. I didn't know the name of it. I didn't know it by name.
So for those
beautiful number.
Here's the thing. The Austin Powers theme is not an original song to those films. It is an appropriated piece. It is a period piece called Big Band Bossa Nova, composed by Quincy Jones. It is but everyone just knows it as, understandably, the Austin Powers theme. And people are like, wow, yeah, that's the perfect theme for that character. Yeah, because that is an authentic swinging big band piece from the 1960s. And it is a groovy piece indeed. Like true, not even parody groovy, like legitimately core center groovy. And if you listen to the full thing with the solos in the middle, it's as you said, Steve, it's a really good track. So yeah, and he's the gift that keeps on giving. A personal crush of mine. He is the father of Rashida Jones. And just like that lineage of talent just continues to go on. So in terms of his accomplishments, they are numerous. They are many. Born in Chicago, Illinois. Did you know that he was a Chicago native?
That I did know.
Yeah. There you go. You know a few things. But yeah, Quincy Jones, 91 years old. Man, once you hit like 83 or something, every day after that is a blessing. You're doing laps. You're doing victory laps there at that point in terms of if you manage to make it that far with a good quality of life. And he had a lot of money too. So, hey, man, rest easy. We'll be enjoying your work for many years to come.
Yeah, I knew he composed the score for The Color Purple. That was because I watched that movie,
which was
recently.
Which was not a musical, right?
No, not the original.
The latest one is. I have not seen it. It is a musical.
The original film, music's a big part of that film, but it is not a musical. Mm-hmm. The new movie is not a remake of the Steven Spielberg film from 1985. The new movie is an adaptation of the Broadway musical.
It kind of did. It feels weird bringing this up, but it kind of did like a Mean Girls thing. You know how Mean Girls like did a reboot, but It wasn't a reboot. It was the musical reboot.
It's the same principle.
Yeah.
Same principle. Yeah, that's exactly right. FYI, too, I don't want to interrupt your very nice monologue. Your mic is a touch hot, though. Your mic is a touch hot.
Oh, it is, yeah.
Yeah, a little bit. But, rest in peace to Quincy Jones. Like I said, 28 Grammy Awards. Primetime Emmy, and a Tony. He's had nominations. He's not technically an EGOT, but he's had nominations for Academy Awards and Golden Globes as well.
Yeah.
So hell of a career to say the very least. Fascinating guy. One of those dudes that when he died too, it was just like, looking through all his compositions and things like that. Really showed you kind of just the diverse impact that he had. He was also, for what it's worth, too, he was one of the four key producers on the new Color Purple movie, too.
Mm.
So he was involved in some direct fashion with the new one as well. So rest in peace to Quincy Jones. Great little.
Yeah, man, a legend, a good one, just someone that's been around for decades, and you never thought you'd just be around forever, just working with new artists, releasing new tracks. But there he is.
Very good stuff. Very well said. We will talk about Conclave here. This is the kind of movie that I generally don't go for. I don't generally seek out these kind of movies. I find them sometimes to be pretty stuffy and uninvolving or a little cold. But I'm gonna be honest with this one though. This one hooked me from the trailer. Saw the trailer about a month and a half ago, and I was like, "This is fascinating. This has really got me." And I'm not one to really enjoy these types of movies per se, or again seek these movies out. But it's definitely one that I think is getting a lot of attention. It's making a little bit more money than movies of this ilk typically do. And I think it's fascinating. I think there's a lot to discuss with this. First things first, the movie is based on a book by Robert Harris. And it's directed by Edward Berger, excuse me. Edward Berger, if that name sounds even tangentially familiar, he was the man who directed the Oscar-nominated, the most recent version of All Quiet on the Western Front back in 2022. That was, I believe, a Netflix exclusive, and that was a really good war movie. There's a ton of war movies out. That was a really good one. That was one that was kind of structured in like vignettes in a way.
Yeah.
Like it would end in certain scenes. Like I remember the one scene from that movie. I don't know if it's in the original, but I remember one of the scenes that sticks out to me from All Quiet on the Western Front is when the lead character gets the soldier's uniform.
Yeah.
And he gets his uniform, I should say, kind of ruined it. And there's a name tag on it that isn't his. And he says, "This belongs to somebody." And then the drill sergeant says, "It was too small for him." And then it cuts. And that's a lie. That's a complete lie. But it's that kind of a war movie. So I just want to give credence to that though. So Berger's the director of this too. Screenwriter Peter Strawn adapts Robert Harris's book. This movie reminded me, and I've not read many, but this movie reminds me kind of like a John Grissom thriller.
Yeah.
In the way it's sort of plotted, in the way it's sort of structured. So essentially, what this movie boils down to is Ralph Fiennes plays Cardinal Thomas Lawrence, and after the sudden death of the Pope in the Vatican, which is the opening scene of the movie. It's not a spoiler. After the sudden death of the Pope, Cardinal Lawrence has to organize this papal conclave in order to elect the next Pope. And there's a handful of cardinals that kind of emerge as candidates. You have Cardinal Tedesco. He's played by Sergio Castellitto. He's like a traditionalist who wants to take like a more aggressive approach to antagonizing religious forces. You have Cardinal Tremblay, played by John Lithgow, who's very suspicious and clearly has a lot of secrets. You have Cardinal Adeyemi, who's played by Lucien Samadi. He's an African American cardinal with conservative politics.
No,
and
just
then you have
just straight up African, like Nigerian.
Oh, he's African. Excuse me. And then you have Cardinal Bellini, played by Stanley Tucci, who's like this reluctant candidate who feels pressure to take over the papacy because of the fact that he's got some more progressive leans than he believes the papacy does. So he kind of like feels pressured to assume the role, even though he doesn't really want it. And essentially, the movie is we were talking about it kind of going back and forth, earlier to start the show. Like, it's a mystery in a way because you're really married to the perspective of Ralph Fiennes as Cardinal Lawrence. You're married to his perspective on all the different cardinals, all his different associates and stuff. And it's a divided house too. They hold many, many elections for Pope. Secrets start to come to life or come to light about each and every one of them too. So there's a lot of messiness in this thing. It really shows you that the Catholic Church is no different than your high school in a lot of ways too. You could almost some of the whispers and the bickerings and stuff like that almost remind you of to reference what you referenced earlier, almost remind you of Mean Girls in some ways. uh this is kind of like the Catholic Church by way of Aaron Sorkin in a way too. It's very talky. It's very the dialogue might not
Is
be
not Aaron Sorkin, thank God.
yeah, it's not as flowery. It might not be the most realistic, but it's engaging. And for a movie that does not have a lot of action and is really confined to the walls of the Catholic Church, because one of the procedures they have to do is they have to go in seclusion in order to elect the next pope. You do not leave the four walls of the Catholic Church or the sort of the sort of estate that they're on, so when you're outside, you're still kind of confined, so you're in this sort of entrapping setting with Conclave as well. There's a lot here to talk about. What do you want to start with, Nam?
I am a Catholic school survivor. I went to Catholic school from preschool all the way through high school. And when Pope John Paul II died in 2005, there, give about, we all got into church and we all cried and we were all like, praying to the portrait of Pope JP2 that they hung there at the altar. And then everyone was like, so what happens now? Because like this has not happened in a long while. And that's when we learned all about how the new pope was chosen. And one thing about Catholic school, at least when I went, one thing about Catholic school that they teach you is that they teach you a lot about, how do you say, pageantry and tradition. And, it's very orchestrated and all that stuff. All of those things, at least, again, there are definitely wings of Christianity. Make that be, let me state that very clearly. As which is also something I learned also in Catholic grade school, that there are sect, SECTS, and wings and factions within Christianity, even Catholicism. And so that is absolutely accurate. And learning all those procedures and how they are kind of isolated from the outside world, like completely and totally, as they figure out their voting and all that stuff, they are they are shown to be, at the end of the day, mere mortals. They are still, especially this group of guys, they are still mere men. And I think that's one like implicit thing that I really appreciated, where it's like, a quarter into the movie, they really drop all the pageantry and all the, all of the airs, I should say. They keep some of the pageantry, but they keep they ditch a lot of the airs and be like, okay, yeah, so he's from this faction, he's this guy, we gotta coalesce around this dude. No, it should be me. Every cardinal picks a pope name when they become cardinal, when they join it, because you don't reach cardinal without thinking you might be pope, which is 1000% accurate, which is just how people work, right? You don't reach like a senator or a house member without thinking that you might become president one day.
It's like a little bit before or the day before school starts and you have to take Spanish class. I already knew what my Spanish name was going to be.
Yeah, that's so true. No, but for this movie, it could have had all of the trappings of something really plodding, very dry, very, all of that. But it has such an interesting pulse behind it. It has a drive. And a lot of it is just baked into the screenplay. Gosh darn it, that's a really cool... I mean, granted, this is the novel, the original novel's work, but gosh darn it, that's a really cool mystery that they have there. Are they doing like... Did the Pope get murdered or some shit? But no, there's a lot of twists and turns between the scandals of each cardinal, the scandals of individual people. the mysteries of, oh, who the hell is this guy, right? That comes out of nowhere. And it's a really, really interesting, and it, for me, it didn't feel too heavy-handed at times. Maybe like one monologue you could say, but I thought it was a pretty tight monologue, a pretty sweet one. And in terms of sweet isn't good. So in terms of all of that, I do think Conclave is something that's really worth watching if you're afraid of something like this, where it's like, oh, it's all these, Oscar nominated. I don't know if they're all Oscar nominated, but all these high profile actors, but they're all older. This looks like it's going to be super boring, but gosh darn, some of the cinematography here, it honestly, like, it was giving me like Chernobyl vibes, the TV series, the HBO TV series, where it's like that level of, hey, we're going to treat this extremely seriously because it is very serious. And every moment of this is going to feel kind of epic. Maybe not moment, but every so often you're going to revel in the sublimity. No, how sublime this moment looks, of all these cardinals walking into church, right? Just walking in, sitting down. And then they contrast it with moments of levity where it's like, yeah, no, the mask is off. They're just talking shit about each other now. Or yeah, they're just getting shit together and they're redoing the Sistine Chapel and just like, oh, Jesus Christ, this guy, what's his name? Oh, all right, yeah. It's that back and forth while maintaining that gravitas behind it all that really gives it a really sweet drive, and I think is really worth your time if you can still stomach politics right now. But I think it's worth your time. Yeah.
Yeah, extremely well said on all fronts with this. What's one of the cool things about this movie too is that, and I think one of the real big reasons it works is because it enhances the mystery by not giving you the explanation immediately when something happens. I'll give an example. Without giving any names away, but there's a scene when they're at lunch in a lunchroom, and one of the sisters walks into the lunchroom, and it's pretty, just general chatter, and then
Sisters as in nuns.
Nuns, excuse me, walks in, and she all of a sudden the chatter is broken up by the sound of a tray hitting the floor, and it sends everybody into silence, and the nun storms out. And then Cardinal Lawrence, again Ralph Fiennes, he gets up and goes to Sister Agnes, played by Isabella Rossellini, and talks to her in a very hushed tone of voice. Now, you don't really know what happened there until like 15 minutes after it does. Because it's about it's at first like Sister Agnes wants to remain confidential, and then Cardinal Lawrence prods, and then finally she sits down to tell him, and then the next scene Cardinal Lawrence goes to meet the cardinal involved in the situation, and then this movie does things, and this is where I think it's so smart, is that like Peter Straughan, the writer, working off of this book, knew how to make the audience lean forward and not give them sort of easy answers or like turn that scene into a shouting match where everything was revealed. This movie makes you kind of sit and stew in anticipation and anxiety before revealing these big reveals that come one after another. And there's quite a few in this movie, but they're not plausibility, whatever you want to say. They're just so gingerly handled that I think that that's a lion's weight of why this movie is not dry and does not feel slow.
No, not at all. And in fact, just as the layers are peeled away, it's like, I'm not looking at a cardinal right now. I'm looking at a bunch of dudes who are just like jockeying for power, which at the end of the day, that's just what that's what a conclave of cardinals is, man. It's very telling. It really peels back a lot of the mystery behind that, but still maintaining a drive with the mystery. I don't know if I can make this point in 4 minutes, but this movie violates a rule that I knowingly violates a rule that I talk about a lot here, or at least a preference, which is to show, not to tell. Here they do nothing but tell. It's all talking, right? There's no flashbacks. There's no cutting to this or that. It is all telling. But it works here, and they know it because you've got world-class actors, legendary actors, and a kick-ass script. And it's so awesomely paced that you are at the seat of your pants where it's like, okay, what did he do? What did this guy do? What's going on here? It's like, is it this? Is it this? It's like, oh, well, is the Catholic Church? Are we going there? But it's like, no, man, it was beautifully handled. And that's why I honestly, you're right. It is a mystery thriller. I'm not disputing that at all. But that's why I treat this like a political drama as well. It's like what House of Cards felt like in that first season before it started going way off the rails, you know? A slightly less menace and a little more realism, which is funny because that was, at the time, House of Cards was really hailed for its kind of, maybe not realism, but, you know, that kind of feel of Washington, D.C. But here it's got a similar stream to it, but having, again, but I will say, like, the theme song to House of Cards is so damn good, and it encapsulates that show so beautifully, and that's why I get that feeling, those aesthetics, and I see that in Conclave, but with a much tighter script that I really, really enjoy. Yeah,
extremely well said. Might as well take a break here. I think that was a good way to end the discussion. Come on back for the second leg of the discussion because I still got a few more points that I'd like to make about this movie. Thoroughly enjoyed it. Glad to see you did too. This is Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube on this Wednesday evening. We come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening. It's about that time we take our Zoom workplace sponsored intermission. We'll be back here in just a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. Shout out to Dominic Guanzon holding down the show for Joe too today, doing hosting duties, doing a damn good job.
Joe, who suggested this movie after we were like, oh man, good thing we can escape to the movies to get a break from all this politics. Ah, shit, it's about politics.
It's about politics. Yeah, Joe suggested the movie. He ain't even here to review it. Wherever he is, I hope he liked it too. We will be back here in just a couple of minutes. Don't go anywhere. Sleepless with Steve live on YouTube. Back and better than ever, Sleepless with Steve, live on YouTube on this Wednesday evening. Come to you live and in living color every Wednesday evening, 6:30 Central Time, talking Conclave, brand new mystery thriller, political drama, if you will, whatever your classification is. It is accurate. So you left off on a really good note talking about this movie and just kind of generally talking about, well, what did you say? I'll let you make your point again if you want to surmise it again.
Yeah, just that this movie is that it's got a lot of really cool drive to it that you don't expect out of an all talk. Look at all these old dudes talking, right? But it's got it for me. And there's a lot of, did you feel any we obviously can't go into detail, but like, were there any twists that you felt were heavy-handed or came out of nowhere? You felt everything felt right.
Well, the fucking ending I didn't see coming in a million years.
I didn't either.
I mean, which I think is brilliant for a movie like this. Like,
yes,
I think is brilliant. I would say, all right, here's the one thing I will say.
Sure.
Just when I thought the most incredulously timed bombing was in a movie this year was going to be Joker Folie à Deux, it was Conclave. I think Conclave has it. I think both are just too perfect timing, but I think Conclave's is even more so. And
because they timed that shit with like the dropping of an envelope. I'm like, okay.
I know that I think Conclave takes the cake over this, but I told you, I think I said during my review, when Catherine and I saw Joker 2 and that happened, I leaned over to her and I whispered, fucking Batman, fucking Batman. And I did the same with this movie. I'm like, fucking Batman. I'm like,
that's funny.
I'm like, it's going to be Batman this time. I promise you, it's going to be Batman. I mean, but like, so there's a couple moments in this thing, mainly the bombing, that, and here's the reason I don't get too fussy about like, oh, like this is where like I don't play CinemaSins, and this is where I hate things like CinemaSins.
Yeah.
Here's the thing. The bombing itself is incredulously timed. It's not an incredulous event, but the timing of it's way too convenient.
Mm-hmm.
But what it leads to,
yes, thank you,
what
Jesus.
it leads to is you're then again reminded, and you get maybe a more intimate look at Cardinal Tedesco's politics on how he wants to take an aggressive approach to religious forces, namely the religion or the religion of Islam, in this case. And it gives the Cardinals an opportunity then to regroup and kind of hear each case and like their response and reactions to this. And then it allows for the more formal emergence of Carlos Diaz Cardinal, who was made a cardinal in pectore, which is a great term, which means in secrecy. And before then, he's kind of on the periphery a little bit. He talks to Cardinal Lawrence a time or two in the movie, but he doesn't have a huge significance really until that climactic sequence with the bombing. That would be the only thing about this movie that I would say is like, like far-fetched, yeah, but it serves a purpose. So I don't get too hung up on it because I think what it leads to is more important than any kind of plausibility in the moment.
Yeah, just the fact that it has a function automatically was like, you know what? This was as perfect as this was. It just led to something really cool. And honestly, like, yeah, that closing monologue from one of the characters, I'm like, you know what? This kind of slaps. It's written pretty damn well. If Sorkin could pull something off with a little less schmaltz like this, then he'd be absolutely perfect. But no, instead we get Aaron Sorkin. No, in terms of this movie, if you were done there, I just wanted to mention real quick.
I'm just gonna say, don't be smart. Don't keep besmirching the name of Aaron Sorkin, the same man that gave us the trial of Chicago 7 and Steve Jobs at the end of the day.
That ending to Trial of Chicago 7, man, where he's like listing off the dead soldiers and everyone starts and then everyone literally clapped. But anyway.
And don't forget about Molly's Game either. Perennially underrated. Anyway,
I'm a fan. I'm a fan of Sorkin. I'm a half embarrassed fan of Sorkin. In terms of this movie, though, I think we also have to mention the role. It actually mirrors so damn perfectly with how women are in the Catholic Church, which is supremely important, but relegated to the background. And that's how women are in this film as well, who are shown to like do a shit ton for the male characters. And it's quick shots and quick and if you miss it. But it's like, oh yeah, they're cooking. Oh yeah, they're cleaning. They're sending their faxes for them because they don't know how to send faxes, right? But then they also play pivotal roles in scandals and how those scandals come to light and how they are delivered and how they are politically developed as the plot goes along. Very critical, a few, but still critical moments. And actually now that is also leading me to a different thought, which is that the just the slices of life. I think that's another thing that really gets me for this movie in a good way, is that it shows so much of the papal process and this feeling of what the Vatican, the inner workings of the Holy See is like. How accurate it is, I'm not 100% sure, but from what I saw back in my Catholic school days, not that I went, but rather like what I was seeing through those videos, what my teachers were showing me, right? And their process is like how the cardinals, when they vote, they put it on a tray first and then dip the tray into the thing like that. That is how they do it. And it's like all these slices of life that feel accurate but still also develop this air of like, this is a whole inner working, this deep chasm of like kind of like ancient mystery, like literally before Christ, or about Christ, right? Just shortly after Christ, that this tradition has been going on for. And it questions that. It questions that tradition. It questions the women's role in it. Maybe not explicitly, but certainly in the subtext as well. And there's really so much going for it here. And that is just beneath the surface of this really cool mystery. Did we I don't know, Steve, if you wanted to respond to that, if you wanted to pivot to the end.
No, I agree. I agree with a lot of
your closing
what you're saying,
homily.
too.
Yes.
Yes, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, and I think it's proof too that like we were consistently talking about how material like this can be so dry and can be so kind of uninvolving, but you have just a surplus of great performances here. I want to just give one quick thing before closing thoughts on Ralph Fiennes, who, by now he's an excellent actor. He's been in so much. He's had a career over 4 decades. He's an outstanding presence. He really though is so good here.
Mm-hmm.
I would even say debatably Oscar worthy, at least a nomination.
Oh yeah,
because he embodies, as just a person, as an actor, the sort of reticence, the emotional reticence necessary for the position that you can believe he's a cardinal too. Then there's a scene in the Pope's chambers, which is a term that'll never not make me laugh. But there's a scene in the Pope's chambers though, where he shows like this unadulterated raw emotion, which is not something cardinals do or are really permitted to do, as I understand it, like in a public setting. It's jarring, but it's appropriately heavy in its like gravity, and he plays that beautifully. And then you have Stanley Tucci and John Lithgow on the perimeter, kind of like sharks circling in on the position of Pope. These are both iconic character actors who command their moments large and small. Lithgow, too. I think Lithgow in this movie is at his best when he's cornered.
Yeah.
When Cardinal Lawrence corners
it's rat-like. It really is.
It is.
We know that well in Chicago here.
I got a kick out of that completely. I got a kick out of that when we like cornered. There's even a shot, I used it in my review at stevepulaski.com. There's a shot of him that's backed into he's backed into a literal corner. The only thing behind him is a pole lamp. And the acting here is really good. Even Isabella Rossellini, who when she first appears is going to have a significant scene. You're kind of almost just waiting for it. And then when it comes, it doesn't disappoint. And it's a testament too to how great she is just as an actress as well. So I think A Lion's Way too, we talk about the writing, which is a huge part of this movie, but I really think too such an active component in this movie's success is just the arsenal of great performers.
Yeah, dude. I guess for a full pivot to the closing thoughts.
Go for it. You go first.
For me, this was such a surprise. I didn't know what to expect with this. I was expecting something like something crazy like Angels and Demons, the Tom Hanks movie, or like, I don't remember Da Vinci Code all that much actually, but I do remember watching Angels and Demons, where Obi-Wan Kenobi immolates himself, but something crazy like that. But no, what this was it was grounded, but it felt epic at the same time. It had a really excellent pace that I very much enjoyed. Superb acting and a really tight script too, and some deep messages and imagery that bring to question all of these very profound things of course the Catholic Church, but even just faith in general. Maybe you could even extrapolate it all the way to like large organizations and groups, right? Like it gets to the core of so many of these characters' archetypes, of what they represent here, and even in the modern, it absolutely will be a timeless movie in terms of its messaging, at least. And with all those things combined, I actually have to give this 4 out of 4 stars.
Oh, wow.
I was honestly flat. I was on a ride, dude. I can't even think of a of a critique all too much. Maybe I'm still in the honeymoon phase. But maybe it's like, oh, this is satisfying politics for me. Maybe that's part of it too, that we didn't quite get. I didn't personally quite get yesterday. But for me, yeah, dude, 4 out of 4 stars. This was a hell of a ride, and it's probably gonna be ghosted at the Oscars, or maybe it'll come stronger. I don't quite know how the campaigning goes on this. It really does feel like a movie, not out of time or out of place, but rather like it's not. I don't know. Am I inaccurate with saying that this is kind of a movie that you don't see as much these days?
Yeah, I would
if
agree.
If it isn't from Aaron Sorkin,
I would agree to that to that measure. I also would say that like the Catholic Church and the Vatican are such entities too that like it's
yeah.
almost in a way it's almost shocking that this thing got made. I don't know how the book fared.
There's been some backlash. There's been some cardinals saying like, yeah, actually real life cardinals saying, yeah, don't read this or don't watch this.
Yeah, like so I'm kind of surprised in a way that it got made. I think a lot of people just don't want to touch material like this, or really even think about it in this sort of sense. And I think for that instance, it's brave too. Um, I do think I now here in contrast, I do think this will get a couple Oscar nominations. I do. There haven't really been a ton of front runners, and it's still very early too in the process. But I absolutely think this does not only deserve it, but I think this will get attention too, especially because Berger's All Quiet on the Western Front did as well. So he's already kind of an established, familiar name with the Academy, having been nominated so recently. But as far as this movie is, it's talky yet it's taut. It shows like the active pollution of such an austere entity that I think is really compelling to kind of watch unfold amidst these like self-indulgent cardinals, these religious men that are like desperate to inherit the papacy. And I also think that what you have here is just you have a screenwriter, Peter Strawn, who's fully intelligent on how to deliver this material in terms of unraveling the mystery in a slow burn fashion. You have Berger then, who conducts this sort of claustrophobic, entrapping sense of seclusion that these cardinals are in because you never really leave the four walls of the church or the estate on which it sits. And then you just have a conclave of its own right of great actors that are performing at their highest degree. It's 3.5 out of 4 stars for me. I thoroughly enjoyed this. I also had to laugh too. This is just, I didn't mention this in my review, but it's funny. There's a whole section in Wikipedia that denotes religious response to the movie. And it's a little bit more positive than you might think, but it's kind of funny how most of them sort of pick up on the same thing. I'm going to pull some quotes here really quick just to kill the last couple of minutes. John Mulderick of the Catholic OSV News said that in conclave, quote unquote, rival viewpoints within the church are caricatured with a broad brush, and the deck is predictably stacked in favor of those who advocate change. Which I think is funny. You have another one too. It's the Archdiocese of Los Angeles's Angelus magazine that wrote at the crucial moment, someone gives a speech so full of platitudes it could have been written by Chat GPT. And then finally, there's an evangelical publication, Christianity Today. Kate Lucky said the film was gorgeous and riveting. But though the film subtly advances progressive convictions, it gives cardinals of all ideological persuasions equal opportunity to fall short. That's a great line.
I just like how, at least for three of them, even though they say, okay, there's critiques here, but game recognized game, this is a good ass movie. Like, it looks good. And like, even they're saying that. And I'm like, okay, they kind of nailed the aesthetic, guys. They kind of got it.
Like I knew what the complaint was going to be.
Right, of course.
Especially with the ending. I knew what the criticism was going to be.
1,000,000%.
But at the same time though, religious publications have not outright condemned this movie and have actually considered it to be a pretty quality look at like bickering cardinals, like a quality film. And that's rare too. Like you said, game recognizes game in so many words. And I just thought that was compelling that even the religious response to this movie has been pretty fair.
Yeah. And I want to be clear, I want to reiterate what I said earlier, is that, you know, Christians and Catholics in particular, they are, at the end of the day, they are still people. They are mortal. They are mortal men and women, right? And maybe even intersex. But they are mortal folks that have their own viewpoints and they have their own approach to their own mythology. So in terms of their factions and their wings of where they stand on certain things, it's as someone who was in that world for 18 years, there's a wider variety of thought than you may think, and that may be even prescient in the events of the last 24 to 48 hours. That I think you'd be a little more surprised to see, and I can really only speak for the Catholic Church, that it's a little more liberal than you might initially think. I'll just leave it at that with what I said there earlier.
Cardinal Lawrence, Ralph Fiennes, has an excellent monologue about how he hopes the next pope operates in doubt. And it's a phenomenal monologue that kind of echoes what you're saying even too, and a little bit about like sort of a progressive side and like the mortal side of Cardinals too. Last thing I'll just add to, and this is just totally my experience, man, this might have been the most fucking packed theater that I've seen a movie in since being in Dubuque. I kid you not. Catherine and I went to a 4:00 showing.
How many showings were
Thursday? There were three. We saw it the day. I think we had something going on. We saw it the day after it came out, so Friday technically. 3 showings on Friday. This was the first. It was 4:00 on a Friday. I think I counted 35 heads, including ours.
That's pretty good. For according to Wikipedia, here on November 6th, $20 million budget. Box office $16.3 million. That's pretty good for something that's really not too much of a mainstream movie, right?
Now let me contextualize the area too that I live in, Eastern Iowa. About roughly 65% of the population here is Catholic.
Okay,
and it is. There's literally the street I live off of. There's a stoplight that only functions when somebody hits the walk button or when church is in session on Sunday. So like literally there's churches everywhere. This is a huge Catholic enclave in which I live.
Wow.
And when we sat down, I told Catherine, I was like, do these people know what kind of movie this is? Like, and everybody seemed stuck with it. Everybody seemed, really pleased by it.
And I know we're trying to wrap up. I'm sorry, but as credence to that, where it's like, yeah, this doesn't beat you over the head with it. Like I keep hammering on Sorkin, and I swear to God, I actually do enjoy his work. But it's not. I'm not even gonna say Sorkin's name anymore. But just the fact that it doesn't beat you over the head with it, right? There is one monologue that you can say is like that, but even then, it's delivered so meekly and it works so well within the context of its own world that is built up. And it's like, oh, there's an actual lesson here. And it feels right. Now, of course, I'm saying that. I am curious to see what others may say as well in terms of within the church. But it's so interesting. Steve, what did you give it a star rating?
I did 3.5.
3.5. All right, yeah.
I think the other term you're looking for too, it's not bleeding heart.
Thank you.
It
That's
really
what I was
isn't.
trying to say. Yeah.
It's not Bleeding Heart, and Sorkin can be Bleeding Heart, and it's not that. Like he
Mm-hmm.
sort of has like the sort of like wide-eyed sort of like liberal look, I guess you would say.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's got sort of the wide-eyed, bleeding heart liberal look. That's I think a lot of people's chief criticism with him, my own included in some of his movies. You don't really get that here. This movie is really not clinical, but this movie is just very detail oriented and very well made. Really glad we got to discuss it here today. Speaking of here, that's the movie next week that you two will be discussing. I'll be out next week. I'm off next week, and then we got one more show before our Thanksgiving holiday. It's already almost Thanksgiving somehow, some way. I'm jealous that you guys get to talk about here, just the way the schedule fell and the dominoes fell, because I do have a lot to say about that movie. I think I'm really curious to hear what both of you say about it. Because it's not a movie that's doing particularly well at the box office. I'm kind of surprised it's gotten made because Zemeckis' last three movies have not done well at the box office. There was The Walk with Joseph Gordon-Levitt. There was Welcome to Marwen with Steve Carell. He has not made a real bona fide hit in years. So I was surprised that he got the budget that he did for this movie, but I'm sort of glad he did. I'm interested to hear what you guys have to say about here. And since I think I said it on the show last week, but I'll say it again today, I can't even deliver my line for the show. But to quote one of the greatest living rappers, Montana of 300, another Chicago man, no need to worry because I'm here now. I speak the truth. I'm the one they want to hear now. And that is where we will end things. That is where we will end things tonight. Great show, Dom. Greatly appreciate you filling in for Joe in terms of hosting the show and making sure we're live and in living color every Wednesday night, because that's where we are. Look for Joe and next week in my place. They will be talking about Robert Zemeckis' new movie here. Until then, I will see you in 2 weeks with a review of Red One when we reunite once again for the first time in over a month, given some conflicting schedules and some happenstance. Always a pleasure to talk movies with you, Dom. Always a pleasure to do this show. For Dominic Guanzon in his trademark blue polo hosting the show, Joe Viso, Unseen